The fluorescent lights in the maternity ward buzzed with a frequency that made my temples ache. I'd been sitting in this plastic chair for 3 hours, clutching a gift bag with a yellow blanket I'd knitted over the past 2 months. Yellow, because Yuki refused to tell me the gender. Said it was bad luck for grandmothers to know before the birth. I should have seen the pattern then. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. We'd love to know how far our stories are going. Brandon appeared at the end of the corridor at 6:47 a.m. I know the exact time because I'd been checking my phone every 5 minutes since his text at 3:22. Baby's here. Healthy. Come when you can. 4 words after 42 weeks of waiting. 4 words that somehow felt like a door closing instead of opening. Mom. He stopped 3 feet away, hands in the pockets of his scrubs. He'd been on shift when Yuki went into labor, which meant he delivered other people's babies while his wife gave birth down the hall. You should probably wait a bit longer. The gift bag crinkled in my grip. I've been waiting 3 hours, honey. I just want to see her for a minute, hold her, then I'll go home and let you all rest. He glanced back toward the room. Yuki's family is with her right now. Her mom, her aunt, her cousin Grace. It's pretty crowded. Crowded. The word landed like a stone in my chest. Harold's family had filled this same hallway when Brandon was born 39 years ago. My mother, my sister Kate, Harold's parents, cousins I barely knew. Everyone had been welcome then. Everyone had been family. I'll wait until they leave, I said, settling back into the chair. Brandon's jaw tightened. Actually, that might take a while. They're planning to stay most of the day. Most of the day. I looked down at the yellow blanket, at the tiny stitches I'd worked on every evening after my shift at the grocery store. Harold would have been here. He would have walked right into that room with his big laugh and his terrible jokes, and nobody would have dared tell him to wait in the hallway. But Harold died 8 months ago, and apparently I died with him. At least in my son's eyes. Brandon. I kept my voice steady. I'm her grandmother. I'd like to meet her. He ran a hand through his hair, and I saw it then. The thing I'd been refusing to see for months. He was scared. Not of me, but of someone in that room. Someone who'd taught him that his mother wasn't important enough to fight for. Let me talk to Yuki first. He disappeared before I could respond. I sat there for another 20 minutes, watching nurses pass with clipboards and tired smiles. A janitor mopped the floor in slow, methodical circles. The coffee machine down the hall ground out another cup for someone who actually belonged here. When Brandon returned, he wasn't alone. Yuki walked beside him in a hospital gown, her black hair pulled into a perfect ponytail despite having given birth 6 hours ago. She'd always been beautiful in that effortless way that made other women feel inferior. Today, she looked triumphant. Celeste. She never called me Mom, never even tried. Brandon says you've been waiting. I stood, smoothing my jacket. I wanted to meet my granddaughter. Our daughter. The correction was soft but deliberate. Olivia May Prescott. May, Harold's mother's name. They'd used it without asking me, without even telling me. I felt something crack inside my chest, small and sharp. That's beautiful, I managed. Yuki smiled. Behind her, I could see into the room. Her mother, Mrs. Yamamoto, held the baby. Her cousin Grace stood nearby, looking uncomfortable. A nurse adjusted an IV. The space was full of people, and none of them were me. We need to discuss something, Yuki said. She pulled a folded paper from her gown pocket. Brandon insisted on a paternity test, hospital policy for our insurance paperwork. She unfolded it slowly, deliberately. The results came back this morning. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? 99, 7% match. She held the paper up like a trophy. Brandon is definitely Olivia's biological father, which means this family finally has a pure-blood heir. Her eyes locked onto mine. Your useless bloodline dies here, Celeste. Everything Harold built, everything the Prescotts worked for, it continues through Brandon and Yuki's line, not yours. The hallway tilted. Brandon, what is she saying? My son wouldn't meet my eyes. The test was routine, Mom. For the insurance. No. I looked between them. No, you're saying something else. You're saying you're not relevant anymore. Yuki's voice was clinical, almost kind. We appreciate everything you did raising Brandon, but this baby represents a new chapter. A better chapter. Without the complications of your influence. Complications. The word came out strangled. Brandon and I have discussed this extensively. We think it's best if you limit your contact with Olivia. Maybe supervised visits once every few months. We'll see how it goes. Behind them, Grace appeared in the doorway. Her face was pale, her hands twisted together like she wanted to say something but couldn't. Our eyes met for just a second before she looked away. You can't do this. I turned to Brandon. Tell her she can't do this. He finally looked at me, and what I saw there was worse than anger. It was resignation. Yuki has some concerns about boundary issues. Maybe it's better to start slow. Boundary issues? My voice rose. I've respected every single rule you've set. I didn't come to the baby shower because Yuki said only her friends were invited. I didn't offer advice about names or nursery colors or anything. I've been invisible for 9 months, and now you're telling me I'm not even allowed to hold my granddaughter. Our daughter, Yuki corrected again. And you're getting emotional, which is exactly what we're concerned about. Olivia needs calm, stable energy. A nurse walked past, glancing at us with obvious discomfort. Dr. Reed, Brandon's mentor from medical school, emerged from another patient's room. He paused when he saw us, his expression unreadable. Everything all right here? He asked. Fine, Yuki said quickly. Just family discussion. But Dr. Reed's eyes met mine, and I saw something flicker there. Recognition, maybe. Or pity. He knew. Somehow this man I'd met exactly twice at hospital functions knew what was happening, and he wasn't surprised. Celeste, I think you should go home. Yuki's voice was final. We'll call you when we're ready for a visit. Maybe in a few weeks. A few weeks? Or months. We'll see how we feel. The gift bag slipped from my hands. The yellow blanket spilled onto the floor. All those hours of work reduced to a pile of yarn at Yuki's feet. She looked down at it, then back at me. You can leave that, she said. We'll add it to the donation pile. Brandon picked up the blanket. For a moment, I thought he might hand it back to me, might say something to defend me. Instead, he folded it carefully and tucked it under his arm. I'll walk you out, Mom. Don't. The word came out harder than I intended. Don't walk me anywhere. I turned and walked toward the elevator, my legs shaking with every step. Behind me, I heard Yuki's voice, bright and satisfied. Grace, come meet your niece properly. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the ground floor. As the doors began to close, I saw Dr. Reed still standing in the hallway, watching me with those unreadable eyes. His hand moved slightly, like he wanted to stop the doors, to say something, but he didn't. The doors closed, and I was alone with the buzzing fluorescent lights and the paper in my hand. The paternity test Yuki had showed me. I looked at it now, really looked at it. 99.7% probability that Brandon Prescott is the biological father. My hands trembled as I read further down the page. There was more text below the highlighted section, smaller print that Yuki's thumb had covered. Additional genetic markers, maternal lineage information. A notation that I couldn't quite understand, something about mitochondrial DNA and donor protocols. The elevator reached the ground floor. I stood there as the doors opened, then closed again, reading that paper over and over. Something wasn't right. Something in those additional notes, in the sections Yuki hadn't wanted me to see. Why would a routine paternity test include donor protocols? My phone buzzed. A text from Brandon. I'm sorry. Give her time. I deleted it without responding. The elevator doors opened again. This time I stepped out into the lobby, past the gift shop with its teddy bears and congratulations balloons, past the reception desk where a woman smiled at me like I was just another visitor having a normal day. Outside, the parking lot stretched endlessly under a gray morning sky. My car sat in the far corner where I'd parked at 3:45 a.m., back when I still thought I'd be welcome. I sat in the driver's seat and stared at that paper until the words blurred together. Pure blood heir, donor protocols, your useless bloodline dies here. Harold used to say that the truth always came out eventually. You just had to be patient enough to wait for it, smart enough to recognize it, and brave enough to face it. I folded the paper carefully and put it in my purse. Then I started the car and drove home to my empty house, where everything Harold had built still stood, solid and real and mine. Where his desk held files and documents I'd never bothered to sort through. Where his final words to me, written in a letter I'd been too heartbroken to read, waited in a drawer. Protect what's yours, he'd said in the hospital, 3 days before he died. Promise me, Celeste. No matter what happens, protect what's yours. I'd promised, and now, driving through the early morning streets of Cleveland with a paternity test burning in my purse, I finally understood what he'd been trying to tell me. 3 days passed before I opened Harold's letter. It sat on the kitchen table where I'd placed it Tuesday morning, propped against the salt shaker like a small white accusation. I walked past it to make coffee. Walked past it to check my phone for messages that never came. Walked past it 17 times before I finally sat down Friday evening and broke the seal. The handwriting was shaky. Harold had written it 2 days before he died, when the morphine made his hands tremble but his mind was still sharp. Celeste, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you're alone. I'm sorry I couldn't stay longer. Sorry I can't protect you from what's coming. But I need you to know something about Brandon's marriage. Yuki isn't who she claims to be. Check the filing cabinet in my office. Bottom drawer, folder marked medical records, family. I did some digging after Brandon told me about the fertility treatments. Something didn't add up. The numbers, the timeline, the clinic they used. I was going to tell you, but then I got sick and ran out of time. Don't let them erase you. You're stronger than you think. Fight for what's yours. Love always. H. My hands shook as I set the letter down. Harold had known. 8 months ago, dying in a hospital bed, he'd known something was wrong with Yuki's pregnancy, and he'd left me evidence. I walked to his office, a small room off the kitchen that I'd barely entered since his death. His reading glasses still sat on the desk. His coffee mug, unwashed, held the ghost of his last cup. I'd kept everything exactly as he'd left it, unable to face the finality of putting it away. The filing cabinet was locked. I found the key in his desk drawer, underneath a stack of medical bills I still needed to pay. My fingers fumbled with the lock 3 times before it clicked open. Bottom drawer. Medical records. Family. The folder was thin, maybe 10 pages. I pulled it out and spread the contents across Harold's desk. The first document was a receipt from Cleveland Fertility Associates dated 18 months ago. $45,000 for comprehensive fertility package. Paid in cash. I stared at that number, my stomach tightening. Brandon had told us the treatments cost $12,000, mostly covered by insurance. The second document was a consent form. Donor egg retrieval and implantation. The donor ID was listed as CFA 2847, anonymous, but at the bottom, in Harold's handwriting, ask about Grace Yamamoto, cousin, same blood type as donor, Grace, the woman who'd stood in that hospital room looking guilty, the woman who wouldn't meet my eyes. My phone rang. Brandon's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Hello, Mom? His voice was careful, rehearsed. How are you? Fine. Listen, I'm sorry about the hospital. Yuki was stressed from the delivery, and she said some things she didn't mean. I waited. We'd like you to come for dinner tomorrow. See Olivia, if you're still interested. If I was still interested. As if meeting my granddaughter was optional, like choosing a restaurant or picking a movie. What time? I asked. 6 o'clock. And Mom? Yuki has some house rules about the baby. No strong perfumes, no kissing her face, wash your hands before holding her. Standard stuff. Standard stuff. I'd raised Brandon without any of those rules, and he'd survived just fine. I'll be there, I said. After he hung up, I sat with Harold's documents spread in front of me. Donor egg, $45,000. Grace Yamamoto. The pieces didn't fit together yet, but I could feel the shape of something larger, something deliberate. I called Brandon back. He answered on the first ring. Mom, did you forget something? The fertility treatments, I said. You told us they cost $12,000. Silence. Brandon? That's what insurance covered. We had to pay some out-of-pocket expenses. $45,000? More silence. Then, how do you know that number? Your father kept records. Dad had no right to. He stopped himself. Those were private medical expenses, Mom. Between Yuki and me. Were they? Because there's a consent form here for donor eggs. You never mentioned using a donor. The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight. Yuki had some complications. We needed help. It's not something we wanted to broadcast. So Olivia isn't biologically Yuki's daughter. She's our daughter, he snapped. Biology doesn't matter. Then why did Yuki make such a big deal about pure-blood heirs? About my useless bloodline? You're twisting her words. She was exhausted, emotional. Brandon. I kept my voice level. Who is Grace Yamamoto? He hung up. I sat there with the dial tone buzzing in my ear, staring at Harold's handwriting. Ask about Grace Yamamoto. Harold had suspected something, found some connection, but died before he could tell me what it meant. Saturday arrived gray and cold. I dressed carefully in a plain blue sweater and slacks, nothing that Yuki could criticize, no perfume, no jewelry except my wedding ring. I stopped at the store and bought a small gift, a board book about animals that I'd loved reading to Brandon. Then I drove to their house on Riverside Drive, the house Harold and I had helped with the down payment. $80,000 we'd given them 3 years ago. Money Harold had saved for 40 years. Brandon had promised we'd always be welcome there. That promise lasted exactly as long as Harold's life. Yuki answered the door in yoga pants and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Celeste, you're early. I checked my phone. 5:58. I can wait in the car if... No, come in. Just take your shoes off and wash your hands. Bathroom's down the hall. I'd been to this house dozens of times. I knew where the bathroom was. The house smelled different. Lavender and something else. Something expensive and deliberately calming. The living room furniture had been rearranged. The photos on the wall were new. Brandon and Yuki at their wedding. Yuki's family at various gatherings. A professional shot of Yuki holding newborn Olivia, both of them glowing. No photos of me. No photos of Harold. I washed my hands twice, scrubbing until my skin turned pink. When I came back to the living room, Brandon was there holding Olivia. She was wrapped in a white blanket, sleeping peacefully. Mom, he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Meet your granddaughter. He placed her in my arms before I could respond. She was tiny, perfect, dark hair like Brandon's, but something about her face reminded me of someone else. I stared at her sleeping features, trying to place the familiarity. She has your nose, Yuki said. She'd appeared beside me, close enough that I could smell her perfume. Brandon's nose, I mean. The Prescott nose. But that wasn't what I was seeing. I was seeing something in the shape of her eyes, the curve of her cheek, something that looked like the photos of Harold's mother that used to hang in our hallway. How much does she weigh? I asked. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, Brandon said. Perfect size. And the fertility treatments. I kept my voice casual. Everything went smoothly. Yuki's hand landed on my shoulder. We should talk about that, actually. Brandon mentioned you found some old paperwork. Your father's paperwork, I corrected. Yes, well, she guided me toward the couch, taking Olivia from my arms as we sat. Harold was confused at the end. The cancer, the medications. He started imagining things, making connections that weren't there. He seemed pretty lucid when he wrote his notes. Brandon sat across from us, his hands clasped between his knees. Mom, the fertility process was complicated. We used a donor because Yuki couldn't produce viable eggs. It's not something we're ashamed of. I never said you should be ashamed. But you're investigating it, Yuki said, calling clinics, asking questions. Brandon's colleague at the hospital mentioned you'd been making inquiries. I hadn't called anyone yet, but apparently they thought I had. I'm trying to understand, I said carefully. Your father left me some questions, and I'd like answers. Yuki stood, cradling Olivia. Here's an answer. What happens between Brandon and me, medically or otherwise, is none of your business. We invited you here as a courtesy to meet Olivia. But if you're going to use this time to interrogate us, I asked 2 questions. 2 invasive questions about our private medical decisions. She walked to the window, her back to me. Brandon, maybe your mother should leave. Yuki, no. She turned and her face was composed, almost serene. This is exactly what I was worried about. Boundary issues. Celeste, you're welcome to visit Olivia, but there need to be rules. No questions about her conception. No digging through our medical history. No bringing up things Harold may or may not have said while he was dying. He wasn't confused, I said. He was dying of cancer. Her voice was gentle, pitying. People say and think all sorts of things at the end. It doesn't mean they're real. I looked at Brandon. You believe that? You think your father was confused? He wouldn't meet my eyes. I think he was trying to protect you. Maybe he saw how close Yuki and I had become, and he worried you'd feel left out. So he made up a conspiracy theory about donor eggs? We're not denying the donor eggs, Brandon said. We're just saying there's nothing suspicious about them. It's a standard procedure. For $45,000 in cash? Yuki's expression flickered. Who told you it was cash? The receipt, in Harold's files. That receipt must be wrong, Brandon said quickly. We paid through insurance and our regular bank account, all documented. But his eyes said something different. His eyes said he knew exactly why they'd paid in cash, and he didn't want me to find out. The doorbell rang. Yuki smiled. That'll be my family. Grace is bringing dinner. Grace, the cousin, the blood match. Actually, I should go. I stood, my legs unsteady. I don't want to intrude on family time. Your family, Brandon said, but the words sounded hollow. Yuki opened the door. Grace stood there holding 2 grocery bags, her face pale and tight. Behind her was Mrs. Yamamoto and another woman I didn't recognize. Grace's eyes met mine. This time she didn't look away. This time I saw something else. Guilt, yes, but also fear. Celeste was just leaving, Yuki announced. She has other plans. Actually, Grace started, but Mrs. Yamamoto put a hand on her arm. Let her go, the older woman said in accented English. She not needed here. I walked past them, past Grace, who whispered something I couldn't quite hear. It sounded like, I'm sorry, or maybe, I'm scared. In my car, I sat gripping the steering wheel. $45,000 in cash, donor eggs, Grace Yamamoto, blood match, Harold's warning, their panic when I asked questions. I pulled out my phone and searched for Cleveland Fertility Associates. The website was professional, sleek. I scrolled through services, pricing, testimonials. Then I found the section on egg donors. Anonymous donors receive compensation between $5,000 and $10,000 per cycle. All donors undergo rigorous medical and psychological screening. Family member donations require additional counseling and legal documentation. Family member donations. Grace was Yuki's cousin. If she'd donated eggs to Yuki, it would explain the blood type match Harold had noted. It would explain why Grace looked so guilty. But it wouldn't explain the cash payment, or why Yuki was so desperate to keep me from asking questions. Unless the donation wasn't entirely voluntary. Unless there was something else about the arrangement that couldn't withstand scrutiny. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Don't come back to the house. You're not welcome anymore. Yuki. I stared at that message, reading it 3 times. Then I forwarded it to my email, saved it, and started researching fertility fraud laws in Ohio. Harold had told me to fight for what was mine. He'd left me evidence for a reason. Whatever Yuki was hiding, whatever had really happened with that pregnancy, I was going to find out. Even if it meant losing Brandon forever. The grocery store where I worked had fluorescent lights that hummed the same way the hospital lights had. I noticed it Tuesday morning during my shift, stocking shelves in aisle 7 while customers pushed carts past me like I was part of the fixtures. Invisible. That's what I'd become. I'd been invisible at the hospital. Invisible in my son's house. Now I was invisible here too, arranging cans of soup in perfect rows while a woman reached past me without saying, "Excuse me," without even acknowledging I existed. Harold used to say I had a presence, that when I walked into a room, people noticed. But Harold had loved me, and love makes you visible. Without it, you're just another 65-year-old woman in a store vest, arranging soup. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, hoping irrationally that it might be Brandon. Instead, it was a notification from my bank. Payment received, $847.32. My bi-weekly paycheck, deposited at 6 a.m. I stared at that number. Harold and I had planned for retirement. We'd saved, invested carefully. Then cancer ate through our savings faster than either of us could have imagined. $280,000 in medical bills. Insurance covered some, but not enough. Never enough. The $80,000 we gave Brandon for his house down payment had been the last of our comfortable reserves. Harold had insisted, said it was important to help our son establish himself. I'd agreed because I always agreed when Harold believed something was right. Now I worked at a grocery store for $847. 32 every 2 weeks, and my son wouldn't let me hold my granddaughter without supervision. Celeste? My manager, Rita, appeared at the end of the aisle. Customer complaint. Someone says you were rude to them. I looked up from the soup cans. I haven't spoken to anyone today. That's the complaint. They asked where the pasta was, and you apparently ignored them. I didn't hear anyone ask me anything. Rita sighed. She was 40, divorced, tired of managing a grocery store, but trapped by mortgage payments and child support. We had more in common than she probably realized. Just be more aware, okay? We've talked about this. She walked away before I could explain that I'd been thinking about donor eggs and cash payments and the way Grace had whispered something as I left Brandon's house. That I'd been thinking about Harold's letter and the medical records hidden in his filing cabinet. That being aware of customers asking about pasta required a level of present-moment consciousness I couldn't access anymore. My lunch break came at noon. I sat in my car in the parking lot, eating a sandwich I'd made 3 days ago that tasted like cardboard. My phone sat on the passenger seat, silent and accusing. No calls from Brandon. No texts. Nothing. I opened my browser and typed Cleveland Fertility Associates fraud into the search bar. The first result was a news article from 6 years ago. Fertility clinic under investigation for unauthorized egg transfers. I clicked it, my sandwich forgotten. The article was brief. Cleveland Fertility Associates had been investigated after several patients reported discrepancies between their donor agreements and actual procedures. The clinic maintained that all transfers were authorized and properly documented. The investigation had been closed due to insufficient evidence. Insufficient evidence, the words every criminal relied on. I scrolled further. More articles, older cases, settlements that had been sealed. A pattern of complaints that never quite became convictions. Women who'd paid thousands for specific donors, only to discover years later that their children's DNA didn't match. Donors who'd been promised anonymity, then found their information shared without consent. And through it all, Cleveland Fertility Associates continued operating, continued advertising, continued promising miracles to desperate couples. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Hello? Mrs. Prescott? A woman's voice, young and uncertain. This is Grace Yamamoto, Yuki's cousin. My heart hammered against my ribs. Yes, I need to talk to you, but not on the phone. She paused. Can you meet me somewhere? Somewhere Yuki won't see us? When? Today, after 5. There's a coffee shop on West 28th Street near the library. Do you know it? I'll find it. Mrs. Prescott? Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. Don't tell anyone. Not Brandon, not anyone. If Yuki finds out I called you... The line went dead. I sat there holding my phone, the sandwich completely forgotten. Grace wanted to talk. Grace, who donated eggs or knew something about eggs or was somehow central to whatever Harold had discovered. Grace, who looked scared. The rest of my shift crawled past. I restocked shelves, scanned items at checkout, smiled at customers who didn't see me. At 4:47 p.m., I clocked out and drove straight to West 28th Street. The coffee shop was small, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a tax preparation office. Inside, it smelled like espresso and cinnamon. Grace sat in the back corner, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses despite the dim interior. I ordered a black coffee and joined her. She pulled off the sunglasses. Her eyes were red, swollen from crying. Thank you for coming. What's going on, Grace? She looked around the shop. Only 3 other customers, all absorbed in laptops or phones. I don't know where to start. Start with why you donated eggs to Yuki. Her face crumpled. I didn't donate them. Not really. I mean, I did, but not the way you think. I waited. 2 years ago, my mom got sick. Lung cancer. Stage 4. She needed treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. Experimental drugs that cost $60,000. I'm a dental hygienist. I make decent money, but not that kind of money. She twisted her coffee cup between her hands. Yuki offered to help, said she knew someone who could pay for everything if I did her a favor. Donate eggs. She said it was simple. 1 procedure, maybe 2 cycles. The clinic would pay me directly, and I could use the money for Mom's treatment. She made it sound like I'd be helping some desperate couple while saving my mother's life. But it wasn't that simple. Grace shook her head. The clinic was Cleveland Fertility Associates. Yuki set up everything, all the appointments, all the paperwork. I signed so many forms, I didn't even read them all. I was terrified Mom would die while I was trying to understand legal language. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo. A woman in a hospital bed, thin and pale, smiling weakly at the camera. That's Mom. She died 8 months ago. The same month Harold died. We'd been mourning in parallel, Grace and I, while Yuki was planning whatever this was. I'm sorry, I said. The treatments didn't work. $60,000 and she lasted 4 more months, but that's not the worst part. Grace's voice dropped. After she died, I found out the eggs hadn't gone to some anonymous couple. They'd gone to Yuki. She used my eggs to make a baby with Brandon. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too warm. She used your eggs without telling you? The paperwork said anonymous donation. I assumed that meant anonymous both ways. But Yuki had planned it from the beginning. She knew her eggs weren't viable. She'd tried 3 times with her own and failed. So she convinced me to donate mine, told me it was for someone else, then used them herself. That's fraud. It's worse than fraud. Grace leaned forward. When I confronted her 2 months ago, after I found out about the pregnancy, she told me if I said anything, she'd ruin me. She'd tell everyone I demanded payment for the eggs, that I tried to blackmail her. She'd make it look like I was the one who broke the law. Did you sign anything agreeing to let her use the eggs? I don't know. I signed so many papers, and I was so scared about Mom. Yuki handled everything. She said she worked with the clinic regularly for her nursing job, that she knew all the doctors, that everything would be simple. Grace's hands trembled. Mrs. Prescott, I think Olivia is legally my daughter. Biologically, anyway. I'm her mother. You're not even related to her. The words hit like a physical blow. Not related. The baby I'd held for 10 minutes in Brandon's living room wasn't my granddaughter at all. She was Grace's daughter, created from Grace's eggs and Brandon's sperm without either of them fully understanding what they were agreeing to. Does Brandon know? I asked. I don't think so. Yuki told him they used an anonymous donor. She probably showed him paperwork that confirmed it, but the paperwork was fake, or at least misleading. Everything at that clinic was designed to be confusing enough that people couldn't figure out what really happened. Why are you telling me this now? Grace looked at me with those red, swollen eyes. Because at the hospital, when Yuki said that thing about pure blood heirs and your useless bloodline, I saw your face. I saw how much it hurt you. And I realized Yuki didn't just lie to me. She lied to everyone. She built this whole family on lies, and now she's trying to erase you completely. She's succeeding. Not if we stop her. Grace pulled a manila envelope from her bag. I kept copies of everything. The consent forms, the payment records, emails between Yuki and the clinic director. Most of it's in medical and legal language I don't fully understand, but maybe you can make sense of it. Or maybe a lawyer can. I took the envelope. It was thick, heavy with paper and secrets. There's something else, Grace said. The payment Yuki made to the clinic. $45,000 in cash. That money didn't come from Brandon and Yuki's savings. How do you know? Because I saw the withdrawal receipt. It was in Yuki's purse one day when she asked me to get her phone. The receipt was from an account in your late husband's name. The world tilted. What? Harold Prescott. The account was a trust or something. I only saw it for a second before Yuki grabbed her purse back, but I'm sure. She used your husband's money to pay for the fertility treatments. Harold's money. The trust he'd set up for emergencies, for our retirement, for Brandon's inheritance someday. Yuki had accessed it somehow and used $45,000 of it to buy eggs from a desperate woman whose mother was dying. How would she get access to Harold's account? Grace shook her head. I don't know. But Mrs. Prescott, if she could steal from a dead man's trust, what else is she capable of? We sat in silence. Around us, the coffee shop continued its quiet rhythm. The espresso machine hissed. Someone laughed at a nearby table. Normal sounds in a normal place where nothing was normal at all. What do you want to happen? I asked finally. Grace wiped her eyes. I want Olivia to know the truth someday. I want Brandon to know he was tricked. I want Yuki to face consequences for what she did. She looked at me. But mostly, I want to stop feeling guilty every time I see that baby. She's mine, but she's not mine. And I can't save her from Yuki any more than I could save my mom. Maybe we can save each other, I said. I opened the envelope. Inside were medical records, consent forms with signatures I'd need to verify, email printouts dated over 2 years, evidence of a scheme so calculated, so deliberately cruel, that it took my breath away. Harold had known something was wrong. He'd started investigating, and then he'd died, leaving me the pieces of a puzzle I was only now beginning to solve. Grace, I said, I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need you to write down everything you remember. Every conversation with Yuki, every appointment at the clinic, every document you signed. Dates, times, names, everything. She nodded. Okay, and I need you to be ready to testify. If this goes where I think it's going, we'll need your statement. You mean legal action? I mean making sure Yuki faces the consequences Grace deserves. For the first time since I'd sat down, Grace smiled. It was small, fragile, but real. Your husband was right about you. What? At Mom's funeral. He came, even though we barely knew your family. He said something to me about how people underestimate quiet women. He said his wife was the strongest person he knew, but most people never saw it because she didn't advertise it. Grace gathered her things. I see it now. After she left, I sat alone with the envelope and my cold coffee. Harold had seen something in me I'd forgotten existed. Strength, purpose, the ability to fight back. Yuki had tried to erase me. She'd humiliated me, excluded me, used my husband's money to build a family that didn't include me. She'd manipulated Grace, deceived Brandon, and constructed an elaborate lie that had lasted 2 years. But she'd made a mistake. She'd left evidence. And she'd underestimated the quiet woman she'd tried to make invisible. I drove home as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Inside my house, Harold's presence still lingered in every room. His chair by the window, his books on the shelf, his letter on the kitchen table. I opened the envelope and spread Grace's documents across the dining room table. Then I pulled out Harold's medical records folder and placed it alongside them. 2 years of lies, documented in black and white. Tomorrow, I'd find a lawyer. Tomorrow, I'd start building a case. Tomorrow, I'd begin the fight Harold had started before he ran out of time. But tonight, I sat in the house we'd built together, surrounded by evidence of betrayal, and felt something I hadn't felt in 8 months. Hope. The law office of Patterson & Associates occupied the 3rd floor of a brick building downtown. I'd found them through an online search for fertility fraud attorneys Ohio. 3 firms had come up. 2 never returned my calls. Patterson & Associates answered on the 2nd ring. The receptionist led me to a conference room with windows overlooking the street. I'd taken the morning off work, telling Rita I had a doctor's appointment. Not entirely a lie. I was sick, just not in the way she assumed. Mrs. Prescott. The lawyer who entered was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a handshake that felt like a promise. "I'm Jennifer Patterson. Thank you for bringing this to us." She'd already reviewed the documents I'd scanned and emailed. Grace's consent forms, the payment receipts, Harold's notes, email printouts from the clinic. Everything spread across the conference table now like evidence at a crime scene. "Tell me what you want," she said, sitting across from me. "I want to know if what Yuki did was illegal." It was. Jennifer pulled out a yellow legal pad. Unauthorized use of donor eggs, fraudulent misrepresentation to the donor, potential theft of funds from a deceased person's trust account. That's 3 separate violations right there, possibly more depending on what else we find. And my son, Brandon, didn't know any of this. Your son is likely a victim too, unless we discover he was complicit in accessing your husband's trust fund. She looked at me carefully. "How did your daughter-in-law get access to Harold's money?" "I don't know. He set up that trust 15 years ago. I'm the primary beneficiary. Brandon was named as secondary, to receive everything after my death." "Did Brandon have power of attorney while your husband was sick?" I thought back to those final weeks. The hospital forms, the medical decisions. Yes, Harold gave him healthcare power of attorney and financial authority to pay bills if we couldn't manage. Jennifer made a note. That's likely how she did it. If Brandon had legal access to the account, and Yuki convinced him to authorize a withdrawal for what he thought were legitimate fertility expenses, the bank would have processed it. But Brandon told me the treatments cost $12,000. Then either he lied, or Yuki showed him falsified invoices that matched the insurance paperwork. She flipped through the payment receipt. "This withdrawal happened 18 months ago, 3 months before your husband died. Did Brandon mention needing money at that time?" I tried to remember. 18 months ago, Harold was declining rapidly. I was focused on doctor appointments, medication schedules, trying to keep him comfortable. "I don't think so. But I wasn't paying attention to much else." "Yuki was counting on that." Jennifer's voice was gentle but firm. "She exploited your grief and your husband's illness to steal money that should have gone to you." The words settled into my chest like stones. Exploited your grief. That's exactly what she'd done. While I was watching Harold die, Yuki was forging documents and manipulating my son and planning a future that erased me completely. "What are my options?" I asked. Jennifer pulled out another folder. "I've been researching Cleveland Fertility Associates. They've had 6 complaints filed against them in the past 8 years. None went to trial. All were settled quietly with non-disclosure agreements. So they're protected. They're experienced at covering their tracks. But Mrs. Prescott, you have something the other complainants didn't have." "What's that?" "Grace Yamamoto, a donor willing to testify that she was deliberately misled about who would receive her eggs. That breaks their entire defense strategy." My phone buzzed. A text from Brandon. "Mom, we need to talk. Can you come by the house tonight?" I showed Jennifer the message. She read it and frowned. "Don't go alone. If Yuki suspects you're building a case, she might try to intimidate you or get you on record saying something they can use against you later. She already banned me from the house, and now she's inviting you back. That's not hospitality, Mrs. Prescott. That's strategy. Jennifer pulled out a business card. I have a colleague who specializes in family law. If this escalates to custody issues or restraining orders, you'll need representation. May I share your information with him? Yes. She made another note. For now, I need you to gather any additional documentation you have. Bank statements showing the trust balance before and after the withdrawal, email correspondence with Brandon about the fertility treatments, photos, text messages, anything that establishes a timeline. How long will this take? Depends on how cooperative the clinic is, and whether Yuki lawyers up immediately or tries to negotiate. She looked at me directly. This could get ugly, Mrs. Prescott. Your son will be caught in the middle. You might lose whatever relationship you have left with him. I've already lost it, I said. I left the law office at 11:30 a.m. with a plan and a churning stomach. Jennifer would file a formal complaint with the Ohio State Medical Board regarding Cleveland Fertility Associates. She'd also send a letter to Yuki informing her that I had legal representation and requesting documentation of the egg donation process. The letter will arrive in 3 days, Jennifer had said. That's when things get interesting. I drove to the bank where Harold and I had maintained our accounts for 30 years. The manager, Tom Morrison, had attended Harold's funeral. He'd shaken my hand and said he was sorry for my loss, and I'd believed him. Now I sat across from him in his office, requesting transaction records for the trust account. This goes back 18 months, Tom said, scrolling through his computer. Let me pull up the details. He clicked several keys, then frowned. Here's the withdrawal. March 15th, 2 years ago. $45,000, cashier's check made out to Cleveland Fertility Associates. Who authorized it? According to our records, Brandon Prescott. He came in with power of attorney documents and requested the check. Said it was for medical expenses related to your husband's care. Medical expenses. The lie was so simple, so believable. Who questions a son trying to help his dying father? Can I get copies of everything? The power of attorney, the withdrawal slip, the check? Tom hesitated. Mrs. Prescott, if there's a legal issue. There is. My lawyer will be contacting you. But I need these records now. He printed everything. 10 pages documenting how Yuki had stolen from a dying man and made my son complicit in the theft. I left the bank at 1:15 p.m. and drove to Cleveland General Hospital. Brandon's shift didn't start until 3, but I wasn't there to see my son. Dr. Marcus Reed's office was on the 4th floor, near the cardiology department. His assistant said he was with a patient, but could see me briefly at 2 o'clock. I waited in the hallway, watching nurses and doctors move through their routines. This had been Harold's world too once. He'd worked as an emergency room nurse for 35 years before retiring. He'd understood hospitals, understood the unspoken rules and hierarchies. He would have known how to navigate this. I was learning as I went. At 2:05, Dr. Reed's door opened. Mrs. Prescott. He didn't seem surprised to see me. Please come in. His office was small, cluttered with medical journals and patient files. He cleared a chair for me and sat behind his desk. I've been wondering if you'd come. You saw what happened at the maternity ward. I saw a daughter-in-law humiliate her husband's mother while the husband stood by and allowed it. His voice was measured, clinical. I've known Brandon for 8 years. He's a good doctor, but he's always been easily influenced by strong personalities. Yuki is more than a strong personality. I know. Dr. Reed opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. Harold came to see me 6 months before he died. He was concerned about Brandon's marriage, about some financial irregularities he'd noticed. He asked if I knew anything about the fertility clinic they were using. My heart raced. What did you tell him? I told him Cleveland Fertility Associates had a reputation for aggressive marketing and questionable ethics. I suggested he look into their licensing records. He slid the folder across the desk. These are the notes I made from our conversation. Harold was convinced Yuki was manipulating Brandon, possibly committing fraud. He wanted to protect you. Inside the folder were handwritten notes dated 8 months before Harold's death. Names, dates, observations about Yuki's behavior at family gatherings. A timeline of Brandon's increasing isolation from me. Why didn't you say something at the hospital? I asked. When you saw what was happening? Because I'm not family. Because intervening would have made things worse for you. He leaned forward. But Mrs. Prescott, I'm willing to testify about this conversation with Harold. I'm willing to provide documentation of the clinic's history. If you're building a case against your daughter-in-law, I'll help. Why? Because Harold was a good man who worked at this hospital for decades. Because I watched him die knowing his wife would be vulnerable to exactly this kind of exploitation. And because Brandon deserves to know the truth, even if it destroys his marriage. I left the hospital at 2:45 with Dr. Reed's folder, and a promise that he'd speak to Jennifer Patterson when requested. 3 people now: Grace, Dr. Reed, and me. 3 witnesses to different pieces of Yuki's scheme. I drove home and responded to Brandon's text. "I'll come at 7, alone." His reply was immediate. "Thank you, Mom." At 6:30 p.m., I dressed carefully. Navy sweater, slacks, minimal jewelry. I put the bank records and Dr. Reed's folder in my purse along with a small voice recorder Jennifer had given me. "If she says anything incriminating, we need it documented," Jennifer had instructed. "Ohio is a one-party consent state. You can legally record conversations you're part of." I arrived at Brandon's house at 6:58. The porch light was on, but the house felt dark somehow, unwelcoming. Yuki answered the door. She'd been crying. Her eyes were red, makeup smudged. "Celeste, thank you for coming." The use of my first name, the tears, the vulnerable posture, all calculated. "Brandon said you wanted to talk." "We do." She stepped aside. "Please, come in." The living room was exactly as I'd left it. Same furniture, same photos that excluded me. But the atmosphere was different. Tense, frightened. Brandon sat on the couch holding Olivia. He looked exhausted. "Mom, sit down." I sat in the chair farthest from them. "We received a letter today," Yuki said, "from a lawyer, Jennifer Patterson. She claims we committed fraud regarding Olivia's conception." I said nothing. "Mom, did you hire a lawyer?" Brandon's voice was tight. "I consulted one, yes." "Why? Why would you do that to us?" "Because Yuki used your father's trust fund to pay for fertility treatments without my knowledge. Because she manipulated Grace Yamamoto into donating eggs under false pretenses. Because she's been lying to you for 2 years." Yuki's tears stopped. Her face went blank, calculating. "That's insane." "Is it?" I pulled out the bank records. March 15th, 2 years ago. You had Brandon authorize a $45,000 withdrawal, told him it was for Harold's medical expenses, then used the money to pay Cleveland Fertility Associates. Brandon stared at the papers. "That's not possible. We paid $12,000 for the treatments." I saw the invoices. You saw falsified invoices. The real cost was $45,000, paid in cash to hide the transaction. "Mom, you're confused. Grace Yamamoto is willing to testify that Yuki convinced her to donate eggs by claiming they'd go to an anonymous couple. Grace's mother was dying of cancer. Yuki exploited that desperation." Yuki stood. "Get out. Get out of my house right now." "It's not your house," I said calmly. "It's Brandon's house, purchased partially with money his father and I provided. Money that was supposed to ensure our family's future, not fund your fertility fraud. Brandon, call the police." But Brandon wasn't moving. He was staring at Olivia, at the baby in his arms, and I could see the calculations running behind his eyes. The timeline, the money, the inconsistencies he'd ignored because it was easier than confronting his wife. "Grace is Olivia's biological mother," I said quietly. "Not Yuki. The eggs came from Grace. That makes you and Grace the biological parents, with Yuki as the gestational carrier. Except Grace never consented to that arrangement, which means the entire pregnancy was built on fraud." The room went silent. Olivia made a small sound, a baby gurgle of contentment. She didn't know she was the center of a conspiracy. She didn't know her entire existence was evidence of a crime. "Brandon," Yuki's voice was pleading now, "don't listen to her. She's trying to destroy our family. Our family." Brandon's voice was hollow. "Is she even legally our daughter, Yuki? Or is she Grace's? She's ours. We raised her. We love her. That's not what I asked." He looked at his wife. Really looked at her. Maybe for the first time in their marriage. "Did you lie about the egg donor?" Yuki's silence was answer enough. Brandon stood, still holding Olivia. He walked past Yuki, past me, and went upstairs. We heard a door close. Yuki turned to me and the tears were gone completely now. "You just destroyed your relationship with your son." "No," I said. "You did. 2 years ago when you decided to build your family on stolen money and coerced donations and lies. He'll never forgive you for this. Maybe not, but at least he'll know the truth." I left before she could respond, walked out into the cool evening air, and sat in my car for 5 minutes before my hands stopped shaking enough to drive. Inside my purse, the voice recorder captured everything. Jennifer would be pleased. Brandon called at 11:47 p.m. I was still awake, sitting at the kitchen table with Harold's letter spread in front of me for the 100th time. When the phone rang, I knew who it would be. Mom. His voice was wrecked, raw from crying or yelling or both. I need to see you. Now. It's almost midnight. I don't care, please. I drove to his house through empty streets. The neighborhood was dark except for scattered porch lights and the blue glow of televisions through windows. Normal people sleeping normal lives while mine fractured into something unrecognizable. Brandon met me at the door. He looked 10 years older than he had 8 hours ago. His hair was disheveled, shirt wrinkled, eyes hollow. "Where's Yuki?" I asked. "Her mother's. She took Olivia." He stepped aside to let me in. "We need to talk." The living room was a disaster. Papers spread across the coffee table, laptop open, files pulled from drawers and stacked haphazardly on the couch. Brandon had been searching for something, tearing through his own life looking for truth. "I went through everything," he said. "Every document from the fertility clinic, every bank statement, every email with Yuki about the treatments." He picked up a folder. "You were right. About all of it." I sat down carefully. "Brandon, the invoices she showed me were fake. The insurance claims were falsified. She made it look like we'd paid $12,000 when the real cost was $45,000. He laughed, a bitter sound. "I'm a doctor. I read medical paperwork every day, and she fooled me completely. She's good at it. That's not an excuse." He sat across from me, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. "I authorized that withdrawal from Dad's trust. I went to the bank, signed the papers, took the check. She told me Dad wanted to help with the treatments, that you'd both agreed. I never questioned it. You were trying to help your father. I was stealing from him, from you." He looked up and his eyes were red. $45,000 that was supposed to be yours. Money Dad saved for your retirement. And I just handed it over because my wife asked me to. The anger I'd been carrying for weeks softened slightly. Brandon was a victim too, manipulated as thoroughly as Grace had been. But he was also my son, and he'd chosen Yuki's word over mine repeatedly. "Why didn't you question it?" I asked. When I asked about the cost, when things didn't add up. Because questioning Yuki meant admitting I'd married someone I didn't really know. He stood, paced to the window. "We met 5 years ago. She was working in the ER when I did my emergency medicine rotation. Smart, beautiful, confident. Everything I thought I wanted. What changed? Nothing changed. That's the problem." He turned to face me. "She was always controlling. Always needed things done exactly her way. I told myself it was because she was organized, driven. But really, she was manipulating every situation to her advantage. Including having a baby. Especially that." He returned to the couch, picked up another document. I found the original consent forms from Cleveland Fertility Associates, the ones we both signed. They clearly state we're using donor eggs from an anonymous source, compensation paid directly by the clinic to the donor. But that's not what happened. No. According to these emails I found in Yuki's personal account, which I shouldn't have accessed but did anyway, she arranged everything privately with the clinic director, paid him an extra $10,000 under the table to falsify the donor records. She paid $55,000 total, $45,000 for the procedure, $10,000 for the falsification. Brandon's voice was hollow. She planned this for months. Found Grace, convinced her to donate, manipulated her into signing paperwork she didn't understand, then used those eggs without telling anyone the donor's identity. Does Grace know you know? I called her an hour ago. We talked for 30 minutes. Mom, the things Yuki did to that woman. He shook his head. Grace's mother was dying. Yuki promised to help, then used that desperation to get what she wanted. And after Grace's mother died, Yuki threatened her to keep her quiet. Grace is brave for coming forward. Grace is terrified. She thinks Yuki will destroy her life. He looked at me directly. Will you? Destroy her life, I mean. If this goes to court? That's not my goal. Then what is your goal? Because Yuki seems to think you want to take Olivia away from us. The accusation stung, even delivered in Brandon's exhausted monotone. I want the truth acknowledged. I want the money restored to Harold's trust. I want Yuki to face legal consequences for fraud. And I want to see my granddaughter without being treated like a criminal. She's not technically your granddaughter. The words came out flat, factual. Biologically, she's Grace's daughter. My daughter, not yours. The reminder was sharp, painful. I know. Does that change anything for you? I thought about it. About the baby I'd held for 10 minutes. knitted a blanket for, imagined reading stories to, and teaching to bake cookies. She's still your daughter. That makes her important to me, biology or not. Brandon's shoulders sagged with relief. I was afraid you'd want nothing to do with her once you knew. I'm not Yuki. I don't calculate worth based on bloodlines. He winced. That thing she said at the hospital, about pure blood heirs and your useless bloodline. I should have stopped her. Should have defended you. Yes, you should have. I was in shock. The paternity test had just confirmed I was the father, and she was so happy, so proud. I didn't want to ruin the moment by fighting with her. So you let her ruin it by attacking me instead. I'm sorry. His voice cracked. Mom, I'm so sorry. For everything. For choosing her over you. For not seeing what she was doing. For letting her make you invisible in your own family. The apology I'd been waiting for, delivered in a wrecked living room at midnight. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like loss. What happens now? I asked. I don't know. I called a divorce lawyer this afternoon. He said I have grounds for annulment based on fraud, but it's complicated because of Olivia. You're divorcing her? How can I stay married to someone who's been lying to me since before the wedding? Who stole from my dying father? Who coerced a grieving woman into donating eggs? He ran his hands through his hair. I can't trust her. Can't look at her without seeing all the manipulation. A knock at the door interrupted us. Brandon tensed. That's probably Yuki. She's been texting, demanding to talk. Do you want me to leave? No. Stay. You should hear this too. He opened the door, but it wasn't Yuki standing on the porch. It was Grace, holding a manila envelope and crying. I'm sorry, she said immediately. I'm so sorry, Brandon. I should have told you sooner. I should have stopped her. Brandon pulled her inside. Grace, it's not your fault. It is. I let her use me. I signed the papers, took the money. I made this happen. You were trying to save your mother. I stood, moved closer to them. Yuki exploited that. This isn't on you. Grace shook her head. But I knew something was wrong. Even then, signing all those forms, I knew the setup was strange, but I was so desperate, so scared. I told myself it was fine, that helping some anonymous couple was a good thing. She looked at Brandon. I didn't know it was you. I swear, I didn't know until after Olivia was born. When did you find out? Brandon asked. 2 months after the birth. I went to visit Yuki, congratulate her. She was showing me photos of the baby, and something about Olivia's face looked familiar. I mentioned it, made a joke about how maybe we had similar genetics. Grace wiped her eyes. Yuki got this look, this panic, and I knew. Suddenly, I understood why she'd been so insistent I donate eggs, why she'd helped with Mom's bills. She'd planned it from the beginning. Why didn't you come to me then? She threatened me. Said if I told anyone, she'd claim I'd demanded money for the eggs illegally, that she'd make it look like I was blackmailing her. Grace pulled papers from the envelope. But I kept everything. Every text message, every email, every receipt. I knew someday I'd need proof. She spread the documents on the coffee table. Text messages showing Yuki's threats. Emails discussing payment arrangements with the clinic director. A notarized statement from Grace's deceased mother's oncologist, confirming the timeline of her illness and the sudden payment of $60,000 for treatments. This is enough, Brandon said quietly. This is enough to destroy her. I don't want to destroy her, Grace said. I just want her to stop hurting people. We stood there, the three of us, surrounded by evidence of Yuki's crimes. Outside, a car drove past. A dog barked in the distance. The world continued its normal rhythm, while ours recalibrated around truth. There's something else, Grace said. Something I need to tell both of you. Brandon and I waited. The clinic director, Dr. Michael Foster. He and Yuki had an affair 3 years ago, before she married you. Grace looked at Brandon. That's how she knew the clinic would cooperate with falsifying records. She had leverage over him. Brandon sat down heavily. An affair. It ended before your wedding, as far as I know, but she used it. Used the connection to arrange everything with the egg donation. Grace's voice was barely a whisper. I'm sorry. I know this makes it worse. It makes it clearer. Brandon's voice was eerily calm. She's been playing a long game. The affair, the fertility fraud, the manipulation. All of it planned, calculated. My phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer Patterson. Can you come to my office tomorrow at 9 a.m.? We need to discuss next steps. I showed Brandon the message. What are you going to do? He asked. Move forward. File formal complaints with the medical board, pursue criminal charges if possible, recover the money from Harold's trust. And Olivia? What happens to her in all this? It was the question I'd been avoiding. The baby was innocent, caught in a web of fraud and manipulation. She deserved better than parents tearing each other apart in legal battles. That depends on you, I said. And on Grace. Grace looked at me with those red, swollen eyes. What do you mean? Biologically, you're Olivia's mother. Legally, that might mean you have parental rights. I don't want to take her away from Brandon. I never wanted that. But you are her mother, and she should know that someday. Brandon stood, walked to the window again. What if we all raised her, the three of us? Not together, but cooperatively. Grace as her biological mother, me as her father, you as her grandmother. And Yuki? I asked. Yuki forfeited her right to be Olivia's mother when she built this family on fraud. His voice was hard now. Decided. I'll fight for sole custody. She can have supervised visitation, maybe. But I won't let her manipulate my daughter the way she manipulated everyone else. She'll fight back, Grace warned. Let her. We have evidence. We have testimony. We have the truth. Brandon turned to face us. And we have something Yuki never had. We have each other. It was a pretty sentiment, but the reality would be messier. Custody battles and fraud investigations and family relationships rebuilt from rubble. Nothing about this would be easy. But sitting in that living room with my son and Grace, surrounded by evidence of betrayal and conspiracy, I felt something shift. The isolation that had suffocated me for months lifted slightly. I wasn't alone anymore. We weren't alone. I'll testify, Grace said. Whatever you need. I'll tell the truth about everything. Thank you, Brandon said. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call, not a text. Yuki's name flashed on the screen. I answered, putting it on speaker so they could all hear. Celeste. Yuki's voice was steel. You're making a mistake. Withdraw the complaint, stop talking to lawyers, and maybe we can all move forward peacefully. Or, I asked, or I'll make sure you never see Olivia again. I'll get a restraining order. I'll tell the court you're unstable, dangerous. I'll paint you as a vindictive old woman trying to destroy her son's marriage. Brandon took the phone from my hand. Yuki, it's me. Silence. I know everything. The affair with Dr. Foster, the falsified records, the threats to Grace, all of it. His voice was steady, cold. You have 24 hours to agree to mediation. Otherwise, I'm filing for divorce and sole custody tomorrow. Brandon, please. 24 hours. Think carefully. He hung up. We stood in silence for a long moment. That was probably the hardest thing I've ever done, Brandon said quietly. But necessary, I replied. Grace checked her phone. I should go. Yuki will know I'm involved if I stay too long. Grace. Brandon stopped her at the door. Thank you. For being brave enough to tell the truth. I'm not brave. I'm just tired of being scared. After she left, Brandon and I sat in his wrecked living room until almost 2 a.m, sorting through documents and building our strategy. He called his divorce lawyer and left a message. I texted Jennifer confirming the 9 a.m. meeting. When I finally drove home, the sky was beginning to lighten. Dawn approaching, breaking through the darkness. Harold used to say the truth was like that. Hard to see at first, then suddenly everywhere. Tomorrow, we'd begin the formal process of exposing Yuki's crimes. Tonight, I'd reclaimed my son. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a start. 6 months later, I stood in my kitchen making coffee while spring sunlight streamed through the windows Harold had installed 20 years ago. The house smelled like cinnamon rolls, the recipe his mother had taught me before she died. My phone buzzed. A text from Brandon. Running 10 minutes late. Olivia spit up on my shirt. I smiled. Normal problems. The kind that didn't involve lawyers or fraud investigations or custody battles. The past 6 months had been brutal. Yuki refused mediation. She hired an expensive attorney and fought every accusation with denials and counter-accusations. She claimed I was mentally unstable, that Grace was lying for attention, that Brandon was having a breakdown and couldn't be trusted to make decisions. But evidence doesn't care about narratives. Jennifer Patterson built an airtight case, the falsified clinic records, the stolen trust fund money, Grace's coerced egg donation, Dr. Foster's affair and cooperation in the fraud, bank statements, emails, text messages, recorded conversations, everything documented, verified, undeniable. The Ohio State Medical Board suspended Cleveland Fertility Associates' license pending a full investigation. Dr. Michael Foster lost his medical license permanently. The clinic director faced criminal charges for fraud and falsification of medical records. Yuki was charged with theft, fraud, and coercion. Her nursing license was suspended. The criminal trial was still pending, scheduled for August, but the civil case had already concluded. Brandon received full custody of Olivia. Yuki was granted supervised visitation, 2 hours every other Saturday at a family center downtown. She'd moved back in with her mother. I heard through Brandon that she was working as a receptionist at a dental office, a job Grace had helped her get despite everything. Grace was kinder than Yuki deserved. The $45,000 stolen from Harold's trust was returned with interest. Jennifer had negotiated a settlement where Yuki's family paid restitution to avoid additional charges. The money sat in my account now, untouched. I didn't need it. My job at the grocery store covered my modest expenses, and Harold's life insurance had finally paid out after months of paperwork. But having the money back meant something. It meant justice, quiet and concrete. Brandon's car pulled into the driveway at exactly 10:12 a.m. I watched through the window as he unbuckled Olivia from her car seat, grabbed the diaper bag, balanced everything with the practiced efficiency of a single father learning as he went. He looked tired, but also lighter somehow. The weight of lies lifted, replaced by the honest exhaustion of parenthood. "Morning, Mom." He kissed my cheek, handed me Olivia. "She's in a good mood today." I held my granddaughter, not biologically mine, but mine in every way that mattered. She was 6 months old now, chubby and alert, with Brandon's dark eyes and Grace's smile. She grabbed at my necklace, gurgling happily. "Coffee's ready," I said. We settled into the kitchen, the space Harold and I had shared for 38 years. Brandon poured coffee while I warmed a bottle for Olivia. Easy routines developed over months of rebuilding trust. "Grace is coming by later," Brandon said. "She wants to talk about Olivia's birthday party next month." "Both of you are coming?" "Yeah." "We've been coordinating better." He smiled. "It's weird, co-parenting with the biological mother who isn't my wife. But Grace is good with her, patient, loving, everything Yuki pretended to be." "Does Grace want more involvement?" I offered her joint custody. She said no. Said Olivia should grow up with me as her primary parent, but she wants to be Aunt Grace for now. When Olivia's older, we'll tell her the truth. He sipped his coffee. Dr. Reed suggested family counseling, for all of us. You, me, Grace. He said trauma like this needs professional processing. "Are you seeing him regularly?" "Every week. He's been incredible. Never says, 'I told you so.' Never makes me feel stupid for not seeing Yuki's manipulation earlier." Brandon looked at me. "He asked about you. Said you should consider counseling too." "I'm fine, Mom." His voice was gentle. "You're not fine. You lost Dad, then lost your family, then had to fight to get us back. That's not something you just get over." He was right. The nightmares had started 2 months ago. Dreams where Harold was dying and I couldn't reach him. Dreams where Yuki stood in hospital corridors laughing while I searched for a granddaughter who didn't exist. I'd wake up gasping, reaching for Harold's side of the bed, finding only emptiness. "I'll think about it," I said. Olivia finished her bottle. I held her against my shoulder, patting her back until she burped. Such simple pleasure, this ordinary moment. 6 months ago, Yuki had banned me from the house. Now I fed my granddaughter breakfast in my own kitchen while her father drank coffee and read news on his phone. Small victories. Quiet reclamation. "The divorce is final next week," Brandon said. "Yuki signed the papers last Tuesday." "How do you feel?" "Relieved, sad, angry." He set down his phone. "Mostly I feel stupid, for not seeing what she was, for letting her manipulate me for so long." "You were in love." "I was in love with a performance. The real Yuki, whoever she is. I never knew." He reached over, touched Olivia's hand, but I got something real out of it. Her. So maybe it wasn't all wasted time. Grace arrived at 11, carrying a notebook and a bag of groceries. She'd lost weight, looked older than her 34 years, but her smile was genuine. "Celeste, thank you for hosting." We sat around the table planning Olivia's first birthday. Cake flavors, guest lists, decorations, normal conversations unmarked by fraud or investigations or legal battles. Grace laughed at something Brandon said. He touched her arm briefly, companionably. They weren't romantic, but they were building something. A partnership centered on Olivia's well-being. Friendship forged through shared trauma. "I saw Yuki last week." Grace said quietly. At the visitation center. Brandon tensed. How is she? Broken. Angry. She tried to apologize, but it felt hollow, like she was apologizing for getting caught, not for what she did. That sounds like her. Grace looked at me. She asked about you. Wanted to know if you'd gotten your money back. What did you tell her? I told her justice doesn't require your permission to happen. Grace's voice was steady. She made choices. Now she lives with consequences. We finished planning the party. Grace left at noon, promising to handle the cake order. Brandon stayed, helping me wash dishes while Olivia napped in the portable crib he kept at my house now. I talked to Kate last week, he said, scrubbing a plate. Your sister. I paused mid-wipe. What did she want? She heard about the case, wanted to know if you were okay. A Kate, who'd sided with Yuki during the investigation, who'd told Brandon I was being vindictive, that I should let his marriage be. We hadn't spoken in 7 months. What did you tell her? I told her you were stronger than anyone gave you credit for, that you'd fought for truth when everyone else was comfortable with lies. He dried his hands, turned to face me. She wants to apologize. I gave her your number. I don't need her apology. Maybe not, but she needs to give it. He was right. Kate's silence had hurt almost as much as Brandon's initial betrayal. Family was supposed to protect family. Instead, she'd chosen sides without knowing the full story. But people make mistakes. Even Kate. Brandon left at 2, taking Olivia home for her afternoon nap. I stood in the doorway waving as his car pulled away, then returned to my quiet house. Harold's office was exactly as I'd left it that night 6 months ago when I'd discovered his letter. I sat at his desk now, touching the reading glasses he'd never wear again, the coffee mug I still couldn't wash. We did it, I said to the empty room. We protected what was ours. The money was returned. Brandon was free. Grace was healing. Olivia would grow up knowing the truth but loved anyway. Justice, quiet and complete. Not the Hollywood ending where everything magically healed. Brandon and I still had careful conversations, still navigated the damage Yuki had inflicted on our relationship. Grace still had nightmares about her mother's death and the coercion she'd endured. I still worked at a grocery store for $8.47 an hour, $32 every 2 weeks. But we were free. Free from lies, free from manipulation, free from the weight of secrets that had nearly destroyed us. My phone rang, Kate's number. I answered. Celeste, she said. I'm sorry. For everything. I know. Can we talk? Maybe coffee sometime? I looked around Harold's office, at the life we'd built together, at the future I was building alone, but not lonely. Yeah. Coffee would be good. After we hung up, I made dinner and ate in front of the television. Normal evening in a normal house. Tomorrow, I'd work my shift at the grocery store. Next week, I'd attend Olivia's doctor appointment with Brandon. Next month, we'd celebrate her first birthday. Small moments strung together into a life reclaimed. That night, I slept without nightmares. And when I woke up Sunday morning, Harold's side of the bed was still empty. But I wasn't.